Hello, everyone. It is June 27th, 2018. Can't believe we are just a few days away from halfway of this year. Cannot believe it. I just do not know where the year has gone. So busy. Just keeping, eyes on the work, doing Unfound stuff. Of course, keeps me busy. I never miss a Friday. So the year has been going so fast, but so much great stuff is getting done. I'm going to welcome some of the people into the group right now, into the discussion. Janet, I see you. Thank you for giving me the thumbs up. Angel, Kelly. Hello, Angel. I see you. Shuri, thank you for giving me that update. That's what you're working on. Doing great work, Shuri. Thank you so much, and I'm sure Melissa thanks you too. Joyce, always love hearing from Joyce. I didn't mention this in the group or anything, but Joyce called me on Monday. We had a great discussion on Monday, didn't we, Joyce? Always love hearing from Joyce Revituzzo. Always. Love talking to her. And Janet, there you go, Janet. Hey, Joyce, hello. Always love talking to guests who just call me out of the blue to talk. Anytime they want to call me, they all have my phone number. They can call me anytime, and we'll talk. Joyce and I love to talk, I think. So and I think Joyce is recovering well. She had a little accident a couple months ago, but I think you're doing well, much better now, Joyce, which is really good. Tara, Leechburg native, tuning in. Thanks, Tara. Stacy, Lori from Ohio. We're doing an Ohio case this week, Lori. I think you saw that. Julie Earley is our case this week. So, Lori, it's great to see you tuning in. And then Pamela is here. Pamela was really brown-nosing the teacher earlier about an hour ago, which I really appreciate. And she doesn't have a question for me, but I know she watches, and she said she took a little snooze so she could watch tonight. And so I need to recognize her. Thank you for all the nice words earlier today, Pamela. I deeply appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. And Sherry, I love that name, Sherry. I'm not going to say her full name, but love the middle name there. Very interesting. Yes, Lori, okay, so you saw this is an Ohio case. So got a lot of things to talk about tonight as usual. Have a lot of questions that have been submitted to me that I'm going to answer. We're going to talk a little bit about DNA in the news section. But then we got Jessica and Lisa. Hello, Sherry. But first and foremost, and maybe some of you saw this already, but I thought I should mention it, that for the first time, Unfound was #1 overall at Podomatic.com, which is the site that hosts Unfound. It's the only true crime podcast on there, to my knowledge, but in all genres, news, politics, music, sports, all the thousands of podcasts that are hosted at Podomatic, Unfound was #1 last week. And that all goes to all of you, and I deeply, deeply appreciate it. As I continue to say, I do the program. You are the people who make it #1. So I deeply appreciate that. I posted a picture of it. You saw #1 new overall in news and politics. I consider Unfound to be a news show. Some people believe it to be some sort of culture show. Other people classify the true crime shows differently. But I think that Unfound is a news show. And then overall for Podomatic, it was #1. Caroline, we're going to be talking. Good to see you tonight, Caroline. We're going to be talking about Jodi here in a bit. And that's something else we'll get to, because today is the 23rd anniversary of the disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit. I consider that case probably the first one that really got me interested in missing persons cases. Of course, that happened right as the internet, I think, was coming to everyone in the United States. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that in a bit. Pamela, welcome tonight. Christy, Jessica, Lisa, everybody tuning in tonight. Do we have any guys that have tuned in yet? Am I the only guy in here? And that's fine. I really don't care. But I don't know if all of you know this. I don't talk about this too much. On a side note, I do know the demographics of Unfound's listeners. Somebody asked me that a couple days ago, and I do know it. And I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, but Unfound's, and I think this is true for all true crime podcasts, I really believe that Unfound's audience is 80% women. And a bulk of those women are between the age of 30 and 55. That's true. If anybody wanted to know that. So anytime, it's because it seems like mostly women are tuning in. It's because for some reason, I think that women are drawn to true crime stories, the TV channel, ID channel, Discovery, Disappeared. It's well known that women are much more interested in that than men are. As a guy, I don't know where that is specifically, but I know that to be true. And I thought that you might find that interesting. But Unfound's number one, and all you ladies have made it so. And I'm working on volume 4. I'm going to finish it by this weekend. It's going to be out. Been working on that. And also, I'm going to be going to Pennsylvania here in a couple weeks, probably driving about 2 weeks exactly from today is probably when I'm going to be driving up there. And I'm going to be seeing my parents for a month. If any of you remember, I did that last year as well, and I continue to do the program. No big deal. Take all the equipment with me, just like I did when I went to South Carolina to see them a couple weeks ago. So things will be happening from Pennsylvania for a month. So probably about the middle of July to the middle of August. So Jessica and Lisa, I don't know if this is frozen up, but thanks for everybody who has tuned in so far tonight. I'm going to take a question right now, and the question is from Erica, who actually asked this question over on the page, not in the group. And before I do that, let me do something very, very quickly, because I think I'm missing something here. Very, very quickly. I want to make sure that I don't miss any comments or questions or anybody tuning in. So I have to switch screens here for a second. Let's see if I can find this. Yeah, because I'm getting comments. Yes, right. I am missing some. Okay. Sherry says, you did a podcast about my friend Chip Campbell, who is missing from Milton. I love that you get this info out there and continue to put the info out there. Sherry, as some of you don't know, I've become very close with his sisters. In fact, we just had lunch a couple weeks ago. Yes, and you're welcome. Lisa, Erica says she fits the demographic. Erica, I'm going to answer your question in a second. And Barbara, how are you doing? Good to see you tonight. So it looks like I'm going to have to alternate between these two. I'm just going to leave it right here. Okay, Erica's question is, hey, Andrea, good to see you tonight. What kind of hope, what's the best, Erica asks, and she references the case from just this past week, Amanda Fravels. What is the best hope for these old cases? That they, get solved or are kept in the public consciousness. Is that the word? That the public continues to know about them and doesn't forget them. And Erica, I'd have to say that the best hope is the public. This is why when I did the episode last week with Amanda's case, I threw it out to the listeners, to all. I gave you as much information as I have, as Melissa has, her sister, regarding anything that went on. As much information I could give you about Xavier and, of course, Lou Frank and what was going on in Amanda's life, what she was saying, what she was doing. The public is the best hope. I know that kind of throws everything up in the air, and it's very unsure of what happens because, frankly, the public latches on to some disappearance cases and not others. That happens. But the best hope is that the public doesn't forget about these cases. The best hope is that some people, it doesn't have to be thousands or even hundreds, just tens of people, just 10 or 20 take an interest in a case, work on it once in a while, maybe try to find a family member. Or, of course, with older cases, some people have died, but the public is the best hope. The police are not the best hope. I'm not going to say they're the worst hope, but they are certainly not the best hope. I don't believe that. The public is going to keep this going. People who take interest in this as amateurs, working on the internet or doing whatever, especially people in the area where the disappearance occurred, those are the best hope for these old cases. Diane says, late to the party tonight. Oh, you're just on time. Casually late, Diane. Casually late. That's how I arrive to parties too. Casually late. Jessica says, very interested in what you have to say about DNA. They found some skill and said it would take 6 months, a year to get results back. Yes, and we're going to talk about that. From more a legal standpoint, probably, Jessica, than maybe you might realize, but we're going to try to do that tonight. So, Erica, I hope that answers your question regarding what's the best hope for old cases. The public is. And to be really technical, the people in the area where the disappearance occurred. Okay? That would be what I say. And they are the ones that are going to have to collect information and then go to the police and kind of urge them on to take a look at whatever information they've collected. For example, when it comes to Lou Frank and Amanda Fravel's case, I'm hoping if some of the listeners can find out Lou Frank's exact name and where he is and what he did with his life after 1986. And I'm hoping that they will go to Las Vegas Metro, or at least give it to Melissa so she can go to Las Vegas Metro with it and get the ball rolling. I think that's what needs to happen in all these old cases, 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old. Shirts. I'm not wearing one of Unfound shirts tonight. Instead, I'm wearing a shirt, as you can see, from the Center of Hope. My friend Mary Lau's, of course, nonprofit organization that I've contributed to a couple times this year. She, when I gave her a contribution, she sent me the shirt along with a bunch of other things. And I just talked to Mary a couple weeks ago. We like to keep in touch. And, she's so supportive of this program. So if you can spare $20, $30, I urge you to go to her site, Center for Hope, and make a donation if you could. So there you go. That's the shirt I am wearing tonight, not an Unfound shirt. The books, you know all about them. I already mentioned Volume 4 is going to be coming out. I have the books right here. I kind of moved things around, but you know what the books look like. You can find them on Amazon and in both ebook and print form. If anyone wants a printed one signed by me, please contact me personally. We can make that happen. I'll sign it for you, ship it to you. No problem. You can contact me personally. Like I said, Volume 4 is going to be, at least the ebook, is going to be coming out within the next 4 to 5 days. I'm really excited about that. Patreon and PayPal continue to get contributions that help Unfound provide things to guests like books and shirts and things like that. That money goes pretty much directly to them, and I'm happy to do it. So if you are not a Patreon supporter, for just $2 a month, you get a shout out from me, and you also have access to the private blog that I write every Friday that concerns the case for that week. And I have to admit, sometimes you do find out some things in that blog that weren't covered in an interview. That's not on purpose. That's just how some things work out. But I offer more of my insight, it's more of an opinion blog than in the episodes. I don't do a lot of theorizing. I do some theorizing at the Patreon blog. $2 a month, you can have access to that. And these aren't like little 500-word, little 3-paragraph things. Generally, they are over 2,000 words every week, at least. So if you'd like to be a Patreon supporter, I'd love to have you there. Once again, entry level, $2 a month. Love to see you there. And then PayPal, you can make a one-time donation through PayPal. I've gotten a couple recently that have been considerable, and I cannot thank those people enough. So I really appreciate that as well. That once again, that money goes to the things that you've seen guests get. And they post pictures of shirts and the books they've received. You see the proof of where that money goes. And then, of course, the playing cards, still work on those. I know Shuri got a deck and she really likes them. They're great if you have parties and things. It's a great way to keep these cases in front of people's eyes. That's why they're there. Thank you. Sherry says Patreon is well worth it. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. Shelly gives me some smiley faces with the hearts in the eyes. I love that. Thank you, Shelly. I appreciate that. I want to talk about, being that I know Caroline Lowe is watching tonight, I want to talk about Jodi Huisentruit. I think I just mentioned her maybe a couple months ago on here, but I'm going to do it again because this is the 23rd anniversary of her disappearance. I can tell you, and I think I told Carolyn earlier today through an email, that really her disappearance is probably what started me getting interested in missing persons cases way back in the 1990s. I can still remember living in Pennsylvania, and I lived in Pennsylvania until 1998. I can remember finding out about her disappearance and actually looking for things on the internet back at that time. And as I told Caroline, that is, I think, one of a few things that put me on the road to doing this program. I've always been interested in mysteries and things. And so when this internet thing happened, I thought, well, this is a great way to find out even more information about disappearances. And Jodi's was the first one that I took a big-time interest in. Big time. And I've been, I think I went to findjodi.com, years and years ago, probably right after the site was created. And I would urge all of you to go to findjodi.com to find out the latest information regarding her disappearance. I think some new billboards have been put up there in the Mason City area. But that continues to be a case that's unsolved. It's a cold case. There are, of course, over the years, some suspects that have been named, but as Caroline would say, has been excluded or included. I have my own theories about the case, but I don't know if they're any closer to solving it now than they were 10 or 20 years ago. I don't know. So I think that her disappearance, it seems to me, I would even go and say this, being when it happened in June of 1995, that it was the first disappearance, in my recollection, that got a lot of internet attentions. Once again, because I think of when it happened. In addition, she was, I guess, a famous person, being that she was a reporter, a broadcaster in Mason City, Iowa. Of course, it's not L.A. or anything, but, somebody who's high profile, on TV, seems to be, not have a worry in the world, had a bunch of friends, respected by her coworkers, and then something happens that morning that she was heading to work. Of course, it also helps that she was attractive. That, of course, as we know, that's the way some people are regarding these cases. If the woman's not attractive, a segment of the population doesn't pay attention. I don't like it, but we know that it happens. But it certainly helped. Attractive young woman, reporter, high profile. And I think that was the first big internet disappearance. That's the way I remember it back then. And like I said, there's findjodi.com. Caroline, who's I know is watching tonight, she writes there. She's been following. She's a part of their team for a long time. She actually, coincidentally, wrote the foreword to Volume 4. Like I mentioned, it's going to be coming out. Caroline wrote the foreword to it. Of course, Mary Lau did the first one, Tad did the second, Volume 2. Carl Koppelman wrote the foreword for Volume 3. Caroline Lowe has written the foreword for Volume 4, and she was very complimentary. In fact, in reading what she had to say, I have to admit I was blushing. And I thank her very much. And also the transcript of the interview that I did with her. She was on Unfound last year, over a year ago. I'm going to say May of last year, but the transcript of my interview with her is also in Volume 4. So, Jodi Huisentruit continues to be on my mind. Somebody's even asking me, would you ever consider doing an episode on her case? technically, I have already, being that I interviewed Caroline last year, Sherry, I've really already done an interview, as much coverage as you're going to get. There's nobody in the public who knows more about Jodi's disappearance than Caroline does. And I had her on the program last year. Of course, she and I also talked about Jacob Wetterling, because that's another case that she covered for quite a while until it was solved in 2016. But so if technically I've already covered it, and also even more technically, the podcast that I did before this one, where I had a co-host, we covered the case on that program too, although I don't know if anybody has access to those episodes. Now, I know I do not. So, Sherry, I think I've already covered it, and I would urge you, there's nowhere on this earth you're going to find more about Jodi's case than going to findjodi.com, FINDJODI.com, and they have a forum there, where you can talk to other people who are interested in the case. I would urge you to go there, to everybody to go there and check it out. They have an email list like I do for my website. You can sign up for free, put your email there, and anytime there's new information, they have new blog posts there. You'll get a notice in your inbox. So, but I thought I just needed to talk about it tonight, being that it's the 23rd anniversary. That case has meant a lot to me. Of course, I wish that disappearance of Jodi and all these disappearances never would have happened. I wish there was no missing persons cases or missing people in the world, but there are. And I think that for me personally and what I'm doing now, I think that case had a great influence on kind of getting me in the mindset that this is a thing. Private people researching missing persons cases, finding out. I think that was the case that kind of something went off my mind and said, oh yeah, there are, besides the police, there are private people who can take an interest in this and try to figure it out on their own. And I think it was Jodi Huisentruit's case that did that for me. I know for other people it's going to probably maybe be a different case. So I wanted to cover that tonight, once again, on the 23rd anniversary of her disappearance. If you're wondering what my theory is, you're probably wondering that. I have no proof of this. Okay, I just want to say, for the record, I don't know anything secret. Nothing secret that I know is influencing my opinion on the case at all. But I continue to believe that it was some infatuated fan with her. I continue to believe that. I know that you're going to read about a guy, John Van Cise, who was kind of a real close friend of hers, who was much older than her. You're going to read about some other possibilities, but I continue to believe to this day that it was somebody who got infatuated with her and was waiting for her that morning outside where she lived. That's my opinion. I can come to the logical conclusion, but I have no real evidence that that's the case. So there you go. So I urge you to go to findjodi.com and check that out. Check that website out. Caroline is a writer there, and I want to support what they're doing there. Shuri says, haha, no secrets. I know where that comes from, Shuri. That's from the movie Sneakers, which is one of my favorite movies, right? Remember that movie? Anybody ever see that with Robert Redford and James Earl Jones, River Phoenix? And it's a great little movie. I think it came out in about 1992. There was the saying, Too Many Secrets. What a great movie. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, I would urge you to, I don't know if it's on Netflix or whatever, or rent it or whatever, but Sneakers with Robert Redford and Sidney Poitier's in it. What a great little movie. All right, let's answer another question before we move on to DNA and some other things. Jill, who said she couldn't tune in tonight, but I'm going to answer her question. She asked me, what needs to be done to get more traction in some of these cases? Let me see if I got that right. Let me make sure that let me read it verbatim. There's a big word. Verbatim, Jill asked me, although I will not be there to participate tonight, in regards to the cases you have covered, what cases do you believe have got more traction since you have covered them? Oh, okay. I did read it wrong. How can we push our beloved cases to do the same? As I've talked about many times, I think that, Sidney Portier, right. I will continue to say that, and I know Joyce is in here, that the Unfound probably had the greatest effect on the McDaniel sisters case. Because, as I think I just talked about this last week, that case was almost dead in the water when I found about it from Mary Lyle back in like March of 2017, when Mary Lyle called me, or maybe it was February, and said, there's this woman. She has a couple daughters who are missing. And I think that what we've been, once again, a case that's 40 years old, that bringing it back into the light, getting people to know about it, getting their pictures out there. I mean, when I first came upon the case, there was only one picture of one of the daughters on the entire internet. And the only thing written about them on the internet was a Reddit article that wasn't even correct. Now, when you do a search for the McDaniel sisters, Google it, it's totally different. That is because of Unfound. Almost, and I'm not bragging, almost exclusively. And I'm happy to do it. And I wish, and with some other cases, we just haven't had as much success. Why that is, if Jill's going to watch this on YouTube later, I don't know why that is. Of course, in this case, maybe it was unusually horrible because it was 2 daughters missing instead of 1. Could be. Could it be because there's a murder attached to the disappearance? Maybe that has something to do with an unsolved murder attached to the disappearance as well. Okay. I'm not going to say it's hit and miss, but I realize after doing this for a year and a half that sometimes a lot of this is just out of my hands. In that particular case with Patty and Peggy McDaniel, there was a listener, I'm not going to say her name, who took a lot of interest and ended up meeting up with, hooking up with Joyce online, and has really worked hard since that time doing work on the case. And that's why then eventually by December of last year, Joyce was recognized, her daughters were remembered at the Missing Children's Day here in Florida. That I'm going to say, and once again, not bragging, but that probably doesn't happen if the case isn't covered by Unfound. Probably. And that is I'm not saying anything about Joyce or anybody else, but Joyce and I have talked about this. And that's why I think that we've become so close. I feel horrible for what has happened to her over the last 40 years. And that case, of course, really resonated me when I was told about it. And she has become, frankly, one of the guests I feel the closest to. And that's why she can call me up on a Monday and we'll just talk for 45 minutes and the time just flies by and it's great. And it's great. So, why does that happen? It's just hard to say. I wish I could, but that's probably the biggest one. And then probably most recent one, Thomas Brown. There's been something, of course, with the video evidence that I uncovered after other people had looked at it and missed it. That is certainly something. In fact, I can't talk about it right now, but I had a phone call today. I called someone today who has the power to even give more attention to Thomas Brown's disappearance, and it's going to happen. I believe it's going to happen, and it's going to be, the case is going, the news about it is going to reach a much bigger audience than even Unfound has. And I was very fortunate to get this person's number from, once again, another connection I have that I've built up since started doing the program. And this person gave me a phone number, called this person and talked to this guy 15, 20 minutes, and he's very interested. So that, I think, is another case that is caught on with the listeners has kind of broken out of the podcast sphere. And I probably, if I sat here, I could think about a couple other ones. Even something like Dow Phillips we covered. Before Unfound covered his case wasn't on NamUs, wasn't on Charlie Project. Now it is. So even something as simple as that, I think it matters. I think it's big. I think it's a big time improvement. And, you just have to take these steps because a lot of these other cases haven't been able to do as much. So you just have to take these little wins here and there when you can get them. Thank you for the thumbs up, Dan. Kimberly says, I need to download 2 episodes to listen on my plane ride back to Louisiana. Which 2 do you recommend? I can't pick those out. Kimberly, first of all, I don't know which ones you've listened to already. But I would say that if you are newer to the program, then I would just go back and start at the beginning. I would go back to the beginning and say, I've listened to this one, listen to this one. No, I haven't listened to this one. Just go back to the beginning in 2016 and work your way forward. That's what I would recommend to you. And I think you'll see an evolution of the show since then. Jamie gives us prayers. Dee Dee, Wonder Woman, good to see you. All of them. Yes, Stacy says all of them. I don't like to pick out cases that are more important than others. I don't like to do that. So when somebody asks me that, I say, just go back to the beginning and start forward, just like I'm doing with the books. So there you go. We're going to get to I'm going to answer one more question, and then we're going to get into a DNA discussion. Jeremiah asked me 2 questions. Where do I see Unfound in 5 years? I have no idea. The way I do Unfound is that I pretty much don't look past the next case. I have other people who do that for me. As I've talked about, my business manager, a little bit of a partner, I guess I'd say. Shay, my longtime friend of mine for over 18 years from Las Vegas. She is doing that. She looks long-term about getting in Unfound into new venues. Once again, other media companies, TV stuff, things like that. She works on that. She has her own things going on, but she also works on that on the side. So that's probably a better question for her because I concentrate on doing the episodes that I have to do. Stacy, I need a television show. Love to do it. Love to give it a shot. But Jeremiah also asked me, could I do more? Could I do more than 1 episode a week? No. There's no way. There's no way. Not to the extent that we get into the details on Unfound. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. I think that once you go to twice a week or that, then the in-depth, the completeness is going to suffer. I just think that's not just the way in podcasting. I think that's in everything. That there's just also not enough days and weeks and hours and minutes and seconds in a week to do that. Jamie, yes. To answer your question, yes. It's my full-time gig. Thank you. Yes. Lisa, great question. Kimberly, about which Lisa, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Just start at the beginning. That's my suggestion. And we got 90 cases. So, and the episodes are long. So you're going to be there probably a while. That's the nice thing about Unfound. The episodes are long. And so if you're going to binge on something, you're going to be there a while. That's just the way it goes. So some people do podcasts that are like AC/DC songs. Unfound is more like Iron Maiden songs, 6 or 7 minute long songs. So there you go. So could I do more, Jeremiah? No. 1 episode a week is the limit simply because of the way that I do it. Now, if it wasn't an interview show and I did a program like a lot of true crime, it was just me by myself just talking and just cobbling the information from Wikipedia and Web Sleuths and everything like a lot of shows do, then maybe twice a week might be possible. But an interview program and the depth that I like to do, no, not possible. Just not possible. All right. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about DNA because there was an article that I posted in the group that got some good discussion going. And I think I need to talk more about it because here's why. I forgot to mention this. On Sunday night, I had my first discussion with a listener who earned her this one-on-one discussion with me by being a Patreon supporter. She had been a Patreon supporter long enough for contributions that got her a 30-minute one-on-one conversation with me. And the conversation ended up going over an hour, which, is fine by me. But she's a listener. I'm not going to say her name. But she wanted to talk about the Thomas Brown case. She also asked me, what was the other question she had for me about another case that we talked about? And then we talked about DNA in relation to how it's, how the police are getting DNA from these private companies and using them to catch people, most notably the Night Stalker. But he's not alone. There have been a lot of cases recently where that has happened. A variety of DNA match DNA companies that figure out your history. My sister did it for my family. I'm 2/3 Irish, no surprise there. And what did I think about that? And, I get concerned when old cases seem to get solved so easily. Now, I know for example, let's just use the original Night Stalker because that's a case we all know. I know that it wasn't easy, and I know they've been looking, and I'm happy that he was caught. It's been 32 years since we know of his last murder in 1986, Janelle Cruz. But it also worries me when all of a sudden it's the case is nowhere, then they do this, they do that, they get some DNA, and then all of a sudden he's caught. And it makes me concerned that maybe somebody's rights were violated at some point. Now, I know what the law is. I know that the law says, and I even went and found the Supreme Court case, yes, really, and it's called California versus Greenwood, where it was determined that people do not have an expectation of privacy when they dispose of things that outside in their garbage where other people's garbage are going to be. Once you do that, your expectation of privacy is gone. And what happened in the Greenwood case was that there were some drug dealers, people doing drugs, and they put their used drugs or something out on the curb with the garbage of everybody else's garbage. Well, the police came along, took that, used it, and Greenwood, whoever else, were convicted. Well, this case ended because they argued that that was still their personal possession and their rights were violated, and the cops needed a warrant to do that. Once again, you can look it up. California versus Greenwood. And at the Supreme Court, I think the decision was 7-2 or 6-2. So fairly considerable judgment. It wasn't like 5-4, something like that. The court held that was not an invasion of Greenwood's privacy. Once you put something in the garbage out there, it becomes public use, which means somebody else can use it or the police can use it. And in this case, the police used it to convict these people. And so the conviction stood. The concern I have, and once again, getting back, and I know what happened, and that's kind of what happened. And so since then, since DNA has become a thing, really, what would we say, late 90s probably, that has been the standard. The California versus Greenwood case has been used as the standard in the use of DNA, meaning, once again, going back to the original Night Stalker case, I forget if it was a cigarette or a straw, whatever it was. If he used that and his DNA is on it and it goes into the trash and the trash goes out to the sidewalk, that is public use and it can be used. And that's how they got his DNA. That is accepted law right now. Here's the problem I have. Let me change up. So what they're saying is that because he knowingly gave up his DNA, he knows his DNA is on that straw or on that cigarette or whatever it was, that he disposed of it. He knows that he's putting his DNA out there. He knows he's a killer, and he knows maybe that he might be caught because of that DNA. So his expectation of privacy is gone. He's willing to give it up. Well, let me change the scenario a little bit. What if the cops believe that this guy, and I didn't write his name down, but what if they believe he's the original Night Stalker, and they're following him? These cops are following him, waiting for him to dispose of his DNA. What if he gets on a subway? They get on the subway with him. He's sitting there. He cuts his hand on a seat. And because his stop is the next stop, he doesn't have time to wipe it off or anything else. And so he gets off, and his blood is there. The cops go. They collect that blood sample, and that is used against him. You see how he didn't willingly give up his DNA. And in fact, in a different scenario, if he had time, he would have had a chance to wipe it up. So, being concerned that somebody might collect that DNA and prove that he's a murderer, a serial killer, but being the circumstances, he didn't willingly give up his DNA. His DNA got into the public. He got cut by accident. So would they, by accident, does the original Night Stalker still have an expectation of privacy? Or does his expectation of privacy, does it go away because of an accident? No. I think that is a totally different scenario than the one that's used in California versus Greenwood. Once again, the difference between willingly giving it up and your DNA accidentally being out there for whatever reason. Because, see, and I believe that, I believe the law is, you're right, Sherry, once he threw it away, it's no longer his. That's right. I agree, but what if he didn't throw anything away? What if he's just sitting there on a park bench and he cuts his arm and there's blood there? He didn't throw the bench away. It's not his. So his DNA is out there. He didn't willingly give it up. I mean, so that, and we also have to look at it this way. This is the other problem I have right now, kind of. I'm being honest. That if we're going to say that once our DNA is on something and it becomes public use, what would happen from somebody going into our garbage, getting our DNA, and cloning us? Of course, they'd be saying, well, you have no expectation of privacy. Once your DNA is given up, tough. Now, we all know, I mean, it might be cool to me to clone of myself, but I think that there is some problem with that. There is a problem with that. It would be, there is, so I think that there is a flaw right now in the law regarding this. I mean, can they only use it for law cases, but you can't use it for medical use? I mean, is that what it's come down to? I think that the law is going to change. I think if I live to be 90 years old, I'm going to guarantee you, no matter what the court, I know that's a big deal with politics right now, how the course is made up. I believe the law is going to change. I believe it's going to change. I think that there's going to be a case where some scenario that I just described, whether it has to do with a private DNA company or not, where they're going to successfully get to the Supreme Court and say, if DNA is given up by accident, it can't be used in criminal proceedings. I believe that's going to happen. I think so. And I think the law is probably going to go in the direction of what I'm thinking regarding this, especially considering that the way medicine is advancing. You also have to think about it this way. All of us, when we go places, we are leaving our DNA everywhere. We are leaving our DNA everywhere. And leaving our DNA everywhere is certainly different than a drug dealer disposing of drugs out on the curb. Because when we go out, we're not intending to leave our DNA anywhere. It just happens. It's life. Things flake off our arms. We have a drop. We get cut somewhere, like I already explained. We have blood dropping here, blood dropping there. Our hair falls out. We're dropping DNA all over the place. Really. And if we don't have an expectation of privacy regarding that, then do we really have any privacy at all? Is the question. If we can just go out, we're just going about our daily lives, DNA dropping out everywhere. Once again, just because we're humans, that's what animals do. You know, dogs, cats, lions, the hair falling out, everything. If our DNA is out there, do you believe that you've given up your expectation of privacy when that happens? Your answer is probably no. But the law says right now the answer is yes. I think that's a problem. Yeah, Vicky says we're also photographed all over the place, and that seems to be okay. You're right. And that's a big issue too. That's a big Shuri says, what about people who want to die anonymously and then using their DNA to find out who they are? Exactly. Good point. I guess what I'm saying here is, why does it take so long to get the results? I was, Jessica, as far as DNA, it's so backed up. I can't speak, Jessica, to your specific case, unfortunately. I don't know. But it takes a long time. Every person I've ever talked to, I talked to the guy from NamUs a couple months ago. Horrible backup. Horrible backup. So I'm not surprised that you're saying that. I have it written in my notes regarding DNA. Use of third-party DNA collection agencies. I'd like to see one of these agreements. These private DNA collection agencies, are they just allowed to give this DNA to anybody? The people who submit their DNA to this, do they know that their DNA is going to be used for crime solving? They may not want one of their family members caught. What about that? And I wonder what my sister did it for our family. I wonder what the legalese in those documents actually is. Now, I know the police have to get a warrant for it, but that doesn't mean that not every warrant is technically legal. Shuri says it's a really good debate topic. This is why I'm bringing it up, because like I said, I don't think the law is as clear as everybody makes it out to be. And that's why I said that Pamela says people should read the policy when giving it up. You're exactly right. I agree, but I'm not sure what the policy says. It's no different than, I guess, us using Facebook. Our information, as we know now, has been used for all sorts of intended or ways that I'm sure none of us ever intended. But we still go back on Facebook. We're still talking here tonight. And we know that Facebook has made millions, if not billions of dollars selling our information. See, I tend to have the belief that somewhere down the road, this is all going to change as more and more people become aware of this. I think the DNA laws are going to change. I think that they're going to get more strict. That's what I believe. Once again, because I think that right now it may seem too easy to some defense attorneys, some legal scholars, and when I was doing a little reading for this episode, the show, there is a movement out there in the legal community to get this stuff challenged. A significant movement to really get this. The thinking is that California versus Greenwood, which once again is the precedent for all of this, is something different than DNA use being collected just anywhere. So there you go. Vicky says, but there is no guarantee that it's truly DNA from that person. I would be cautious in using third-party DNA in criminal investigations. There's just no control. Vicky, that's possible. That's surely possible. So all I'm saying is that if our DNA, as soon as it is deposited somewhere out there, if it can be used to clone us or for criminal investigations or whatever else, then we really have no privacy at all, I would say. So I wanted to talk about that tonight. Vicky said we also need every state to collect DNA from all felons when incarcerating them. Yeah, Vicky, and it's interesting you mentioned that because, California, the first time they did that was because of the original Night Stalker. They got a law passed out there in the 1980s looking for him in jail, and we know we didn't find him, and now we know why he didn't find him, because he wasn't in jail. But yes, California got that passed, but as we know, not every law that gets passed is constitutional. Laws are getting turned by state courts, federal courts all the time. That's the way our system works. It's called judicial review. And so we need every state to collect DNA from all felons when incarcerating them. It's not a national thing. It's not a federal thing, and each state is going to decide that for their own. I can see why people want that. So, but that doesn't mean that it's constitutional. Just because people want things doesn't necessarily mean that it's constitutional. Kelly says, GED match privacy policy available on the first page of website. Okay. So there you go. But I wanted to talk about that tonight. I think it's a great discussion, and I know that it's going to continue to come up because I know that these cases, once again, using third-party, I guess you'd call them private DNA collection agencies, that's going to continue. And I'm just wondering if this is some sort of loophole in the law. Are we living in the time before Miranda? Remember, there was a time, at least in the United States, where if somebody was handcuffed or whatever, you never had to read them their rights. Now you do. And that wasn't so long ago. Miranda happened in the 1960s. And I just wonder if right now we're living kind of in a pre-Miranda world where somewhere down the line, very shortly, there's going to be a different standard with the use of DNA. And I'm guessing it's going to make convicting people harder. But in the process, are we at least protecting everybody else's rights like us, the people who don't break the law? So, once again, if this was China or North Korea, there would be no discussion like this. It would just be they just convict people. We know they do things differently there. But in countries, rights are a concern, that's different. It's just different. It's much easier to convict killers and people in countries where there are no rights. They just do things. In places where they believe in the rights of the individual and the individual gets a defense attorney and they get a fair trial and everything, it's harder. It's just the way it is. So I wanted to talk about that. In fact, I want to say one more thing. This was from a New York Times article in 2008, from an article about this growing movement, like it says, 10 years ago. Most people, this is a quote from the article, most people have no idea that they risk surrendering their genetic identity to the police by, for instance, failing to destroy a used coffee cup. Moreover, even if they do realize it, there is no way to avoid abandoning one's DNA in public. That's what I've been talking about here. We are depositing our DNA all over the place, and right now the standard is we should expect no privacy for that DNA. I have a concern with that. So let me go to another question. Anna asked me, so it's I hope that's something that all of you can think about, have a discussion in the group, and read about it a little bit more. And please go check out the California versus Greenwood case. It's very interesting. That is the basis for everything that we do now with DNA. Anna asked me, is there a follow-up to Kim Kessler? No, there's not. If you'll remember, I happened to talk to Kim Kessler's mother back in April. I didn't know that Kim Kessler was going to cause another woman to disappear about 2 weeks later. And I posted about that, talked about that in the group. The reason I was talking to her mother was because Kim Kessler's from Western Pennsylvania, and I was hoping to cover that case with the Tribune Review. Won't have to do that now. But it was why, if you'll remember, I talked to her mother. It was one of the worst conversations I've ever had since I started Unfound. She was very combative, very rude, very suspicious, and I now looking back on it now, that she probably thought I was a cop looking for her daughter. And I think that she knew exactly where her daughter was. That's my belief. I have no proof of that. I don't know anymore since Kim Kessler was found and is in jail. I know no more about it than any of you do. And I really, frankly, have not been following it because I've been caught up with Unfound work. And Kimberly also asked me, this is going to be the final question for tonight, and then we're going to talk about this week's case. Kimberly asked me if what got me started. I think that, let me see the exact, probably have asked this before, and I know Kimberly's in there. But what drives your passion for the missing? What got you started? I can answer that. And I know Kimberly's here. What got me started? First of all, I think I have a mind for mysteries and information. I think that I explained earlier about Jodi Huisentruit. That was the first national case that I found out about that really started making me think, you know what, with the internet, with the advent of the internet, public people not doing law enforcement can help in finding information about all sorts of cases, including missing persons cases. That's when the light bulb went off in my mind, Kimberly, back 1995, 96, 97, somewhere there. I think that what also got me started in the podcast is that, and I've joked about this before, I think I'm a very self-deprecating guy, that I don't manage people very well, but I manage information fairly well. I can look at all sorts of kind of different information and figure out how it needs to be lined up so other people can make sense of it. My mind works, I think, decently well that way. Whereas you give me a 7-Eleven store to run, forget it. Can't do it. Just can't do it. But the podcast, how I got into it was, I didn't even know that true crime podcasting was a thing until about 2015. And I listened to about the first 6 episodes of the Maura Murray podcast. And I figured out that and I'd known about podcasting for a long time. I just didn't know that true crime podcasting was a thing. I knew about politics and sports and things, but true crime podcasting, I didn't know about it. I just didn't. And I thought, well, okay, maybe I might be able to do something like that. So it was just a variety of things put together. And also, I know people who've gotten to know me and have tuned in before. I talk about my experience, public speaking experience. I've written some independent movies, so I have experience writing things and then having to talk about them or recite lines and things. And I was an actor in Las Vegas at Star Trek The Experience for 4.5 years. It all contributes to what Unfound is. And on top of that, I think I'm a curious guy and I love to know stuff. And I think that if anybody were to meet me in person, even though I do all this talking on this live show, in the interviews, I talk very little. If you were to meet me in person, I talk very little. I like to ask people questions. I like to learn things. So I like to know things that other people don't know. And then when the time is right, I like to tell other people about it. So I think that all comes into, what happens when Unfound happens every Friday. So Kimberly, okay, she's the person who asked the question. Well, I've listened to a lot of Missing Persons podcasts, and yours the one that has stuck with me. I'm glad to hear it, Kimberly. That makes me very happy. Kimberly also says, I love Star Trek. Me too. And it was a great job for 4.5 years. So there's that. So that's how it all happened, Kimberly. And then it started. I did another podcast before this one, a true crime podcast where I had a co-host. Didn't work out. And then I started Unfound in September 2016, and here we are in June, almost July of 2018, and I think we've done a lot of good things so far. Let's get this week's case. It is the disappearance of Julie Earley. She disappeared from Trotwood, Ohio on May 21st, 2012. So this is, I don't know how many Ohio cases we've done, but we've done a few. I am calling this episode a lethal combination. because one of the other one of the other interests I have, and I happen upon it once in a while on the episodes, is human nature. What makes us human? What tendencies do humans have? What makes us different from animals and plants and everything else? Obviously, it's our big brains, but we behave differently. We interact with each other differently. Why is that? That's fascinating to me. And, one of the most fascinating things to me about human nature is our ability to do some of the most beautiful things on earth. We take care of we have hospitals for animals. We figure out ways to get animals to live longer. We try to help each other. We voluntarily do this, much more than any other animal out there. But on the other hand, we are capable of some of the worst stuff on earth. We are the only animal that kills for fun. We're the only animal that tortures for fun. We do that. And I think that's also a factor of our big brains. There's just something in our brains that's just like that. Not everybody ends up doing it, but we know that we are capable of it. We know as humans we are capable of it. Whereas you don't see dogs torturing other dogs. The dogs fight each other dogs, but they do that for territory, for food and everything. They don't fight each other dogs, and they don't torture other dogs for fun. Well, what happens when those two types of people meet? Usually it's a lethal combination. And the beautiful people, people who want to do great things and are loving and respect each other, and then these people who are ugly. That kind of combination can be lethal. And this is what I think happened in Julie Earley's case, and that's why I'm calling this a lethal combination, because I think what happened is she being the giver, the person who wanted love, wanted to give love, she hooked up with the wrong guy who was a taker. And really, mentioning another Ohio case, this is a case that's, somewhat like Rosemary Rapp's case that we covered about a month ago. This is a case where Julie's husband claims that he was out that day. She was home by herself. She talked to a couple people on the phone. When he came home, she was gone. And this is a case also, maybe if this seems familiar to you, the interview for this episode is with Julie's sister, Kim Willie, and she was on Dr. Phil a couple years ago. Also on the program was Julie's husband at the time. His name is Craig Earley. He was on the program. Of course, Dr. Phil asked him about, did he, do something to his wife? And of course, he denied it. Well, this is the case that we are covering this Friday. And so we, of course, as always, get into the nitty-gritty of what happened. It's what I think hurt this case is that the sister, Kim, who once again is the interview for this episode, didn't even find out about her sister's disappearance until about a month later. And there was a reason for that once again. We get into it during the interview. But once again, this is Julie Earley, Earley, and it is the disappearance from Trotwood, Ohio, May 21st, 2012. The episode is going to be called A Lethal Combination, because probably if Julie would have found a different type of person, a different type of guy, I'm guessing. Once again, every case has its own interpretation. But it's obvious to me that when she got married to Craig Earley, that her life got worse. And even before she disappeared. So that's the case for this week. So I hope you'll check it out. I'll be posting a few more things in the discussion group and on the page before this episode comes out at 2 p.m. on Friday. Also working on a couple other cases. And as I stated, if you got the newsletter that I sent out last week, one of these Fridays I'm going to be doing a recap of all the cases and what has happened on them since Unfound covered them. That's coming. I don't know when. Maybe next week, maybe the week after, maybe when I'm in Pennsylvania. I haven't figured that out, but A lot of people have been asking for that type of program, being that we've done 90 cases, and we're probably due for one of those. So that's in the works, along with a couple other disappearances, possibly one out of Indiana, another one out of California. Working on one out of Montana, which would be the first for that state. So I'm hoping we can make those things happen in the next few weeks. But once again, this week's case, the disappearance of Julie Earley, called A Lethal Combination, Trotwood, Ohio. In this case is about just over 6 years old. So what did we do tonight? I told you about how Unfound is now number 1 on Podomatic. Very excited about that. Hopefully we can keep that position. I'm working on Volume 4. It's going to be out within the next few days. I'm going to be going to Pennsylvania for a month in a couple weeks, but I'll be doing the show there. No problem. I can take everything with me. I'm going to be driving up there. Very excited about that, to see my parents for a month, but I'm still going to be working, so they're probably going to think, Ed, you're not spending enough time with us. Talked about the shirts. I'm wearing a shirt from Mary Lau's organization, Center for Hope in New York. I hope you can make a contribution to them. The books, Patreon and PayPal. If you want to get in and read the blog, $2 a month on Patreon. Of course, you just want to make a one-time contribution. Unfoundpodcast@gmail.com is the way to contribute through PayPal. The playing cards, makeplayingcards.com. Answered a bunch of questions from Kimberly, Jill, Jeremiah, Anna, and Erica. Talked extensively about Jodi Huisentruit in her case, and how all of you should subscribe to the email service at findjodi.com. That's a really good website, one of the best websites probably for an unsolved disappearance. Had a real good discussion about DNA, and we even talked about a Supreme Court case, very highbrow tonight. That case is California versus Greenwood, and how it continues to influence us today regarding the handling of DNA. And then finally, we talked about the disappearance of Julie Earley, and that's going to be this Friday's case. So we got a lot done tonight in an hour and 7 minutes. So with that, I'm going to bid you all a good night. Thank you so much for tuning in. You'll hear me on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. I don't anticipate any download problems like we had a couple weeks ago. And just send me messages. Any more questions you ever have, you can contact me privately. I'm very easy to reach. I think I am one of the most responsive podcasters out there to my listeners' wants and needs and questions. And I will talk to you next Wednesday. But you'll hear me this Friday with the disappearance of Julie Earley. Oh, I want to add one more thing. Did all of you go to triblive.com this past Sunday and check out the disappearance of Robert Allison in Pittsburgh? Did you do that? If you haven't, go to triblive.com, find the article, and read about it. Please, please do. triblive.com, triblive.com. Robert Allison, who disappeared in Pittsburgh in December of 1994. Please check that article out. They worked very hard on that article. And we already got the one planned for July. I'm very excited about it. So I'm going to leave you with that. Good night, everyone. Favorite time of my week, every week. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in. Deeply appreciate it.